All right, next question. Okay, so I'm feeling a lot of love coming from my inner parent towards my inner children, but I'm not feeling the same in reverse. I've started listening out for feelings of love on the side of my inner children, but so far I haven't found anything. Why might this be? How can I create more loving connection there? Okay, fantastic question. Fantastic question. So oftentimes when we start the inner parenting work, we start the 4 people within work. You know how in the 4 people within work, you have the 2 grown-ups and the 2 inner children? And you were mentioning that you can feel love from your inner parent towards your inner children, but they're not really reciprocating that love. What that generally is around is that there's been a power struggle that has existed between the inner children and the inner grown-ups for a really long time. And what that looks like is one of your inner children is a decision maker and one of your grown-ups is a decision maker, and they will war against each other on who gets to make the decisions. And one of your inner children is an information collector and one of your inner grown-ups is an information collector, and they war against each other on who gets to collect the information on which you base the decisions then. So what happens is that there's almost like this real sense of power struggle and warring within between the inner children and the inner grown-ups. And oftentimes it's easier for the inner grown-ups to start loving the inner children because generally those functions have a higher cognitive capacity to move through things faster. So oftentimes when it comes to the different parts of you loving each other, the inner children are kind of lagging behind a little bit until they get enough confidence, until you become fluent enough using those parts of you to start feeling that appreciation towards the so-called grown-up parts of you. So this is why this happens most often. I mean, sometimes it can just be that there's such a wounding and distrust within the inner child that they are just incapable of having that love. But even if that is true, you can still teach respect. You can teach respect through setting boundaries between the grown-up parts of you and the inner child parts of you. Now, how you can create more loving connection there, so coming from the inner children to the grown-up parts, is that the grown-up parts will have to almost prove themselves to the inner children. What that means is that the grown-up parts of you, they must show the inner children that oftentimes behave like prey animals, really fidgety and darty and worried and if you've seen horses in the wild or zebras, how they're always worried about everything. They're always like fidgety and everything. That's often the inner children. And if you know anything about horse training, what you do when you try to desensitize a horse to something that they're not used to, in this case, love, sharing love with your inner children, is you approach the issue and then you retreat. You approach and you retreat. And that's by the approach and retreat approach, you then you show the inner child that they are in fact safe. And what you don't do is you don't attack them for not being ready to love you. You don't berate them because that's probably why they're unable to love you right now, because they probably felt berated by your parents as you were growing up, or another person in a perceived position of power. But so what you don't do is you don't attack them for their incapacity to reciprocate the love. What you do is you just keep going. It might take a year, it might take 2 years, it might take 3 months. But if you can approach and retreat those inner children with your offers of love, then what happens is that they'll start to trust you, they'll start to appreciate you, they'll start to really get into a space where you become predictable. And when you become predictable about loving them, then they might be able to relax into loving you back, or those grown-up parts back. But it has to be the piece of desensitization, and then them almost becoming bored because you're so predictable. And then they can generally relax and allow themselves to have that, what our inner children often have, this keen sense of attachment and love and wanting to connect with the grown-up parts of us. Okay, so I hope that answered that question. I'd love to hear your reflections on that. Are your inner children easily loving your grown-up parts of you? Are they feeling safe with them? Do they trust them? Do your inner children trust the grown-up parts of you? If not, why do you think that is? If they have a challenge with the grown-up parts of you, what do you think that might be? And what do your grown-up parts need to do in order to become extremely positively predictable to your inner children? Okay, well, thank you everyone for being here today with me. It's been a joy as always, and I will see you again in our next live Q&A session next week. Have a great week, everyone.